Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're going through the part 3 of the developer manifesto. Let's get into it. So, what we're going to do is we'll go through the problem, specifics, and just sort of vibe it out. So, problem. The reduced reservation stat provides very little benefit at low values, but becomes very powerful when heavily invested in. This allows players to run every aura in the game. Not great, right? It also forces reduced reservation to be balanced around extreme levels of investment, limiting how useful it can be to characters who do not run enormous numbers of reservation skills. Makes sense. Solution. Replace reservation reduction with reservation efficiency. When stacked, reservation efficiency does not allow for infinite auras. Words. Okay. Modifiers to reservation have been replaced with reservation efficiency. Reservation efficiency works by dividing the cost of the reservation effect. 100% increased reservation efficiency would half the cost of all auras. Okay. Seems good. 50% reservation efficiency cuts the cost enough to let you run an additional 50% reservation aura. So in a recent video, I talked about would it be possible to run like two 50% auras and a 25% aura? Possibly. Passives and item modifiers with reduced reservation have been replaced with increased mana reservation efficiency. Okay. So here's all the specifics, and you know, it might be good. Characters specialize in maximizing the power of auras, provide an absolutely insane amount of damage and defense to party members, making a party with an aura specialized character so much more effective than one without. So they're hitting clusters, fair, and they like go into the specifics. Basically, you're not going to go voices or the auras now. It sucks that that's a build which has been effectively deleted, especially since it was a build that required so much setup. Deleting builds from the game does feel bad, but I think in this case it might be justifiable. Curses. Okay. Characters specialize in maximizing the number and power of curses provide far too much damage and defense to party members, making a party with a curse specialized character so much more effective than one without. Solution. Make curse cluster jewels a small cluster jewel, with many of the notables reworked to benefit specific curses significantly, greatly improving a regular character wanting to maximize their curse of choice. Make significant changes to DoT's skin as it applies many curses at almost no cost. Interesting, very underutilized unique, but I can understand why they would do this change. Otherwise, maybe that'd be like the only way to do like curse supports, and they didn't want it to be like a mandatory item. So they go into a bunch of specifics. They talk about some other uniques that have been touched upon. DoT's skin now grants hexes from skills, can apply 5 additional, whereas before you could just do every hex in the game. And they've hit Replica DoT's Damning, Will of the Storm Sail, and Jinx Juju. F-U Juju. Ellie damage over time. Alright, this is the one that I'm kind of interested in. The other stuff is like, it's important, but it wasn't my hype. My hype was the EO and the EE. So the Ellie damage over time effects of Cold Dot, Burning, and Ignite are 2 dependent on Ellie Overload and Elemental Equilibrium. Ignites are 2 dependent on the Ignite damage multiplier on skills. So I actually planned out a full video. I couldn't be bothered to upload it because I was like, oh, who cares? It probably won't get affected. But I stripped out the whole video about how I think my biggest issue with Ignite currently is how all these different skills have Ignite multi on there. And with the old Ignite system, all you needed was fire damage. Or if you did some like fire to cold conversion memes or cold damage could ignite, some other setups. But like basically what ended up happening, instead of having loads of options for Ignite builds, you only ever use the builds with good multiplier. So like Fireball, Divine Ire, etc. So they're like, okay, we recognize that was a problem. Let's address that bit. That aspect I'm very happy with, and I'm very excited to see what Ignite will be like. The Ellie Overload and the EE changes, though, less keen. I will say for the EE changes, it feels like, because they've also moved the placement, EE is now on the bottom right of the skill tree. I've spoken for a long time how I feel frustrated about elemental attack builds in the bottom right of the tree, how they don't have cool and interesting options, because you've got like Ellie Overload and EE up in the top left. And I feel like that EE change will help out some of the builds I've been specifically talking about, but at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah, but all those builds still just have to go crit. Because Ellie Overload, I feel like Ellie Overload should be more in the middle of the tree. I feel like it should be more accessible. With the changes they've made, Ellie Overload is going to be in a really weird spot. So I guess I should get into some of the specifics. Okay, so one thing they're doing, which is pretty big, is they're like upping all the numbers. You're like, oh, numbers, big, whoa, pog. But that's because they're changing EE and EO to compensate. So EE now just gives exposure, so it's 25% exposure of elements that you didn't hit with. So if you hit with fire damage, 25% exposure on cold and lightning, and rather than like the whole gaining res, losing res, all that stuff. So it's very strong. It's something that you can like just have a side skill with like Stormbrand or whatever, and you can have that old like EE playstyle. You can also use stuff like Wild Strike or Ellie Hit that rotates between elements, so it's good for those kind of builds. But getting into the Ellie Overload stuff though, that is a little bit more yikes. Where's the exact wording, what they changed to it? So what it does now is it only does hit and ailment, so it won't scale cold dot at all. It also won't scale burn dot, so righteous fire, flame wall, burning ground from fire trap, none of those will be affected by this. Also, now it's only to skilled if they crit in the last 8 seconds. So you have to crit with the skill you're using. So for example, if you were a fireball build trying to use Ellie Overload, your fireball will only gain the damage if the fireball is what crit. So in some ways, this is nice quality of life because a lot of builds won't feel forced to run all this side utility stuff. But this is a massive nerf to anything like totems, or it's rare, but you would sometimes do Ellie Overload traps. Specifically, Ellie Overload burning ground traps. That stuff's all like dead now because you can't proc it with traps or totems. So those builds are just forced into going crit harder. And my biggest issue with Ellie Overload is so many builds felt like they had to go crit and it had bad placement on the tree. And with these changes, builds which had okay placement will feel forced to go crit because they can't directly proc it itself. We need to wait to see the math to see how all this stuff works out, if it's a buff or a nerf. But the Ellie Overload change really is a bit of a disappointment. I think some builds will feel much better, but I think some builds will feel much more pigeonholed because of this change. And again, it does nothing for non-crit Ellie attack builds, which I was really hoping would get some love from this. So that kind of sucks. They're reworking Burning Arrow. They thought it was too complicated. I mean, okay, I guess. Another thing they're adding for Ignite builds is Flame Surge will be the spell version, and there'll be an attack version, which basically is your like supplement skill to like stack up your damage. So you ignite with like your Fireball or your Burning Arrow, your whatever, and then you use your Flame Surge, pew, 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 to get the extra deeps, or the attack Ignite would use whatever their attack skill is. So this is kind of interesting to me in the sense that they've removed a bunch of the hurdles and the admin and the busy work from like having to worry about EE and EO uptime. And then like, but we still want it to be active, so we're introducing this new thing. It'll be interesting to see how it kind of meshes out. So, yeah, I'm going to do another video tomorrow, most likely, which will be me summarizing my total thoughts on all three. Once I've really let everything sink in and sort of marinate a little. But I just very briefly, I felt the best about part 1. Part 2, I felt very negatively about. Part 3, I'm in a sort of optimistic-ish wait and see, because we just need to see how a lot of this stuff maths out. We need to see what the passive tree kind of looks like with this aura stuff. The aura stuff, I think, could maybe be good for just solo players. But we need to see, like, what the values are like, how easy it is to actually get these clusters. Like, do you need 1 aura cluster, or do you need, like, 2, or, like, you know, how many do you need to realistically fit in another aura to your build with these changes? But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Mark Rubier, by the way.